Welcome to another episode of Oops, All Dragons. I am once again and always Lisa.
When would you ever not be Lisa?
I don't know.
Okay. Except, I guess, when you're playing D&D. This is Varun, by the way. Hi, everybody.
Hey.
Episode number 5. Hitting the milestone. Nice round number.
5 is not a round number.
It's a nice round number. Yeah.
It's a good number. But some people might still
Halfway
have
to 10.
Problems with it because it's an odd number.
I didn't say it was an even number. I just said it was a nice
right.
round 5.
You're right. So, here we are. Another episode. What have you been up to? What have you been playing?
So, it's 2020, so I've been indoors playing D&D a lot. It's kind of what this podcast has bred. So it's 2 games. I'm actually running 2 games right now. There's a third one but that one's on hold right now because some folks are out of town, on vacation. Good luck. But
vacation in a pandemic?
Yeah, and the reason I'm floundering here is because I'm literally delving into my mind to try and go back and remember what happened during those sessions, just because I know I have notes, so when I go to the next session I'll be able to refresh myself. But
I can tell you one thing that happened.
Yeah.
You forgot which game we were playing. So I just happened to be in both of those games. And you were like, at the top of one of them, you're like, oh yeah, that in the other game, and I had to be like, no, that's this game actually. That's what we're playing tonight. Is that one?
The reason that happened. So, and this is for the listeners who are not there. So, very beginning of the session, everyone's settling in, and I'm looking at my notes, and I'm looking through the pages on Roll20 that I'd created and all the maps and everything I'd set up, and I just realized, oh my god, I forgot a thing. I forgot something. I need to go through, and I'm like, oh wait, I'm in the completely wrong game in Roll20. I need to be in the one with, your character's name is Valmine and Layla. And then you just say, no, that's this game. And then I freeze. Because now I've realized that I have absolutely spaced on the... even though we're here on time, we're in the thing, we're in the call.
It's every other Sunday.
My mind has gone
blank. The only one that has a consistent day.
On what we're doing here.
It's okay. It works out because then when we... later during the week when we started the other game that I'm
running and you're playing in.
Yeah.
I also get confused.
You also got confused, but I also got confused because in one game we met the physical representation of rot, and in this other game I'm like, oh yeah, and we just met the rot. Wait, nope.
Yep.
Wrong game. Different game.
Yeah. So... Oh
okay.
Boy. The games themselves are going fun. They're going fine.
We're
just having
blending
fun.
into each other.
Yes,
just as time is and everything is in this this our play year.
Yeah, time is dilating and everything is happening all at once.
Yeah.
But yes, the campaigns themselves are going pretty fun. The one where you're playing Layla, the custom race dryad druid. Pretty interesting. You just kind of bitch smack the god of rot and just literally left him to rot, and then
I mean, he's doing what he does best.
And then in the other session, it's a little shorter one because one of our main players couldn't be there, but you in fact did kill a giant frost salamander and rip out its heart to make an altar to your archfey patron. So
as you do. Oh, funny story is I think, was it yesterday? I went into a metaphysical store, one of those witchcraft stores, and I bought a book on altar making, because next session I have to have a design figured out for the altar to my Archfey patron that
That's
I'm going to
not
make
why.
around this salamander heart.
Don't lie.
And
That's
so
not
I
why you got
literally
that book.
bought a book for it.
That's not why you bought that book. You bought that book
I
because
mean,
you want
no,
to do
listen,
this in
it
real
definitely
life.
gave me an excuse, but I don't need a good reason to spend money on a witchcraft
On
book,
witchy
but
things.
here I am making a reason.
It's just your rationalization. This is
fine.
not a frivolous
No one
purchase
has
for you.
ever accused me of being responsible with money.
It's not a spur of the moment situation. No, you found this, you sought this out, and you're like, this is good. This is gonna be good for D&D, but this is gonna be good for some other things.
Yeah, I went to the guy that was running the shop that day, and I was like, hey, do you have any books on altar making? And he was like, we do happen to have one. We've had it in the store
Guess
for a
what?
long time. I'll give it to you for half off. And I was like, say less, I will take it.
But yes,
It's
so
been sitting there waiting for me. It's fine.
I expect great things then. Let's see.
That's expecting that I actually get around to reading it. That's a whole other
You got
challenge
2
that I have to
weeks,
face.
man. Find a page that you like, one that looks cool, and go with that. Just read about that one.
You're right.
And
And then as for my game,
Yeah.
We go a while sometimes between playing it, but we just had a session after it's been like 6 weeks
I think it was
since we
6
last
weeks,
played
yeah.
because schedules have been changing. And I personally, I don't like, just because of the way that I like to run the session, I don't like it when people are missing, so I would rather reschedule. And that's a personal preference. I don't... I don't mind either way, but if it can be helped, I would rather reschedule. And it worked out because I was able to force you guys to, and Varun is in my game, for those who don't know. I was able to force you guys to spill your backstories because
Lots of spilled
getting
tea.
impatient. I just needed some information out there. I needed some understanding to happen between you guys. So that was fun.
That was it was interesting. We just get
How was tea and cookies with an ancient
with the
elf?
Baba Yaga,
With
chicken house
one
and
of
all.
the Baba Yaga, yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm glad you kind of took my thing where my whole secret is my character, has low self-esteem and has no big secret in his backstory, and he wants to like be a hero or be someone important. Yeah, and that's his thing. That's what he's been hiding from everyone. I'm just kind of glad you took that, whereas everyone has these other like bigger backstories going on.
And you're just like, I want friends.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's one of because we could have the deep dark secret or whatnot, but when one of our mutual friends, Caitlin, she's in the game you're playing in, but she's in a couple other games as well. She's a fiend, and a lot of her characters, and this is something I wanted to try, is they're kind of not to say that they're fulfilled, but they don't have a big tragic backstory, except Ro, kind of. She'll talk about that one day when we get her on this. But yeah, she's usually expressing the fact that she likes the group that she's with most of the time, because they're wacky folk, but they're not like murder hobos. So I wanted my character to be a little bit like that, because I've done the tragic backstory thing, whatnot, where there's some kind of guy I gotta go beat, or there's some kind of thing I gotta go get, and we have a little bit of that going on as well. Like you've already thrown me some bones that way. But I wanted to be like, I'm the only human in the group. I'm a fairly like non-special guy.
It's true, you are Bob the human.
I'm Bob the human.
I think on the topic of grand backstories and deep lore. I think that dovetails nicely with our topic of the day, which is the expectations created by a little show known as Critical Role.
Little thing, you may have heard of it.
And the person often credited with being the brains behind it, Matthew Mercer. So, I guess we should just get into it.
So
I'm just gonna get into it.
I was gonna say, so this is gonna be a Lisa episode. I think we're just gonna set the stage on, if anyone isn't familiar with the Mercer effect, on just what it is, and then it's just gonna be an hour of Lisa just going ham. So Lisa, for the uninitiated, what is the Matthew Mercer effect?
Okay. It's a little complicated, but I think the simplest way that people tend to put it is essentially people who are becoming introduced to the game of D&D through actual play or live play Twitch streams, specifically Critical Role, which is the one that Matt Mercer DMs.
It's the most popular.
It is one of the most popular. It's been running for, I might get this wrong, 5 years now, something like that.
Cool.
They have a huge fan base. They're able to pull incredible amounts of money in fundraising. They are currently fundraising an animated show, or they're not fundraising it anymore, but they're currently producing an animated show that is going to eventually be on Amazon Prime, which makes perfect sense because it's a Twitch thing, but that's beside the point. The point is, people see what Mercer does in his game, and the players in Critical Role, they see what they do, and they hold that as the standard of what D&D is. And then those people go out and actually sit down at a D&D game or a tabletop game with people locally, and their expectations of what D&D is are so skewed by the show that tragedy ensues in one way or another.
Multiple different tragedies, which I think we'll get into.
Yeah.
But before we dig into it, the little extra backstory: Mercer and all of his friends are professional voice actors.
Right.
So
that's
Leon
exactly
Kennedy,
what I was gonna get into first.
But then the 5 years thing. Also, that's when I started DMing. So we're coming at this from two different perspectives, because you came initiated from Critical Role.
Right.
You've followed from their first campaign now into their second one. You follow all their stuff. You still watch the show all the time.
Yeah.
I was initially not aware of any Mercer stuff. I actually saw him playing some D&D stuff that wasn't Critical Role. That was some on some different channels. And then later on got initiated through some of Critical Role. I watched some of their first campaign, and then now I'm catching up on the few latest episodes of their newest campaign.
Every now and again, I'll send you a scene that I think would be interesting to you. And we have our friend Caitlin, who we mentioned earlier, who is an incredible D&D player, is a fellow critter, as the fans of the show are called. Oh, that's what you folks are called, huh? That's what we're called. Yeah, isn't it terrible?
Oh my god.
And at least until recently, the community built around the show is actually pretty wholesome and pretty good. There's every now and again there's a little bit of drama, but what fandom community doesn't have drama? I've been on the internet for only a mere 10 years, as far as fandom internet goes, and it's par for the course. Once a thing reaches a certain mass, the people who like that thing are just so varied, and there's just so many of them that inevitably there are differences in opinion, and drama ensues. But that's not necessarily what we're going to talk about what I need to talk about. I need to get off my chest some feelings I have about how people talk about the Mercer effect and how people manifest the Mercer effect. I think, I don't know, there's not really any like clean way to get into it. I'm just gonna get into it. They're professionals. So for the uninitiated,
extremely professional,
the players in Critical Role are all seasoned voice actors, stage actors, TV actors, actors. I'm going to keep saying it. They're actors. They're trained. They're professionals. They've been doing this for a very, 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 very long time.
And Mercer himself has been a DM for, what, like 20 years?
Yeah, Mercer has been a DM since he was a teenager, and then he is also a professional voice actor known very well for his many roles. He is McCree in Overwatch. He's Leon in Resident Evil. There's a bunch of stuff, right?
Those are the big ones.
Those are the two big ones. But there's hardly a game that you're not going to hear his voice in, at least nowadays.
So they're pros.
And, some of them are, if not all of them are either theater trained or have experience with improv. And then on top of that, before the show started 5 years ago, they had already been playing together as a group of friends for 5 years. Something like that. I don't know if it's 5 years. For some amount of time.
They're pretty
just
close.
For a couple of years already. They had already been playing together, and they were already all close friends by the time the show started. So one thing that I think is hard for people who had never played D&D before, when they're getting into the show and the show is their first introduction into the game, is to understanding what that means. Playing for that many years together, what that means. It means that you understand each other's play style. You know each other's characters. Everybody knows what they like to do. There's a certain amount of trust in the improv that's built over that amount of time. There's just an understanding that is built with time, and there's nothing else that's going to build that other than time. So let's say you're a fan of Critical Role, you've never played a D&D game before, that is your only frame of reference is Critical Role, and you sit down at a table at your local game store on D&D night, you're gonna get disappointed, because that is a table of strangers who don't know each other, playing characters that you don't know. The DM doesn't know you, doesn't know what you really like, unless they're a good DM and, like, ask you beforehand, like, what do you like? Do you like roleplay? Do you like combat? Most of the time, they're not going to ask you that. They're just going to get into whatever they prepared for the night, and you just have to roll with it. And that is a pun. You may laugh.
Initial title of the show, but it was taken.
That is like the first step of what they call the Mercer effect, and should really be called the Critical Role effect. So this is the other thing, is that it's not Mercer. This is the other thing that I think the show, when people talk about the Mercer effect, it lacks nuance and understanding that, like, it's not Mercer who makes the whole thing. It's the whole cast, including Mercer. So it should be called the Critical Role effect.
He's the face of it. So
but he's the face of it. He is the DM, so he is seen as the god of it, right? He's seen as the head of this beast. And to be honest, a lot of the best parts of the show, he puts the pieces on the table, but it's the players that create the memorable things about it and create that expectation. And again, that comes from them understanding each other as players, as performers, as characters, all of that. There's just so many aspects of it. So people tend to forget that these people are professional
or maybe
actors,
not even realize
professional characters. Yeah, they don't. It's sort of an unconscious bias. It's just, I think it also comes from just, like, the average person doesn't really think about how their media gets created. So they don't really think about how much training goes into being an actor, how much training goes into being a voice actor, how much time you need to put in to get to the point where these actors are.
Mm-hmm.
And my big thing with Critical Role, and I think one of the reasons where I do and don't feel the effects of the Critical Role effect on myself, is I did theater for a long time. I thought I was going to be an actor. I have, like, quote-unquote training. If you call being in a high school play training, it's not. I'm not going to toot my own horn on that one. But, you know, I have some experience with what it takes to produce a piece of media. So I watch stuff like Critical Role or listen to something like The Adventure Zone, which is the McElroy brothers, the McElroy dynasty. Oh, good. Tell me how that goes. And there are so many, over the past couple of years, there's so many actual play D&D stuff and tabletop stuff that has been coming out. And with all of those, as spectators, we have to start understanding it as theater. You're not watching a game at that point. It's theater. And especially like the big streaming ones, those, it's a performance. You're watching an improv performance with a certain game structure attached to it, to certain aspects of it, but it's theater. And bringing the expectations of that, it's kind of like going to watch Phantom of the Opera, and then when you go to your, I don't know, local library, I don't know, I kind of lost the thread on that metaphor immediately, but it's kind of like going to watch a play and then going to interact with normal people on a regular day-to-day basis and expecting their dialogue to be Shakespearean and expecting people to burst into song, and it's like, no, you've misunderstood the assignment.
So I'll push back on this one a little bit because I did my research on this because, like I mentioned, you're in this, and I know there's more facets of this, and we're definitely going to get into it. But like the proliferation, I guess, proliferation of the term Matt Mercer effect. It came from Reddit, right? Where there's like kind of a viral post just talking about what this DM was dealing with on the Dungeons and Dragons subreddit, and titled it the Matt Mercer effect. And a lot of the points they were going into, it was about expectation setting, but the final line they left off on was it was something along the lines of, so how do you all deal with DMs who the players will stand by or will kind of like put up on that pedestal? Which, and this is in the research that I was doing, one of the angles that one of these videos took of yes, it's the Critical Role effect in the aspect of they've got all the production, they've got all this money behind it, it's their job versus like whatever your actual job is. Like they have the time to put into this to make the show.
They have
so
the motivation.
Good. Yeah, but Mercer himself is a 20-year like veteran dungeon master. He's able to craft this world. He created, the Wildmount setting, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of that. No, not to say no, but very few dungeon masters are ever going to be on that level. So
and there are some dungeon masters who surpass that level too.
I mean,
that's something else. Is that like you might encounter a DM who's even better than Mercer.
I'm not even going to say like surpass or publish a book or any of that, but he puts in a lot of time. They put in a lot of motivation behind this. They created this whole, multimedia thing because they have the show, they have comics, they have an animated show coming out now. All this, D&D's never going to be like that in the way that if you go to play basketball, you're not going to play like the LeBron James.
You're
right
not
off
Kobe.
the bat.
Calm down.
So these are some of the comparisons I heard in my research. You don't go shoot hoops and get mad that you're not dunking like Michael Jordan, or you're not shooting 3-pointers like LeBron. You don't go and play football and get mad that you're not able to like set the rushing record.
That's a much better metaphor than mine.
So, yeah, from my perspective, because I had been insulated from all of this for a very long time until pretty much when you and I started D&Ding together. Then I got a bit more exposed to this sort of stuff. Even though I knew of Mercer, I didn't know really much of Critical Role or anything like that, so I didn't know people felt this way, that D&D was supposed to be like this. And I'm not some, like, veteran, because a lot of the folks who I heard talking about, like, the Mercer effect is kind of silly, are definitely like 20, 30-year veterans who have been doing this since, like, the 80s. 5 years at most, like right when the show started, apparently. That's how long I've been doing this. How long I've been in this sphere, and I didn't know about any of that. My expectation was I want to run a good game. I had some bad experiences role playing with folks online, but I also took the good from those as well. So my whole goal was to try to make the game around what's with the good, take away a lot of the bad that I saw, and it's about, and then there's two forks I want to go here. The first one is like expectation setting. You already touched on it, Lisa. Critical Role, very high expectation if you think that's what D&D is going to be like. And Mercer himself responded to that Reddit post to be like, yeah, it kind of breaks his heart, and he talks about setting proper expectations for the players at the table. But then there's the other thing where in the research that I was doing of DMs who players love and will talk about at the table. I don't know if you've ever had this happen, where a player you're kind of you're running a game from or whatever it is, they'll say, oh, like X DM, would have never done that or would have done this different. Have you ever had that happen, Lisa? Billy the
not that I can think
Billy
of,
the DM.
But I like, there's another game that I'm in that it's like the only game that I'm in that you're not also in one way or another. And a couple of the players in that game do also watch Critical Role, and sometimes will get a little sidetracked because something in that game will remind us of something that happened in Critical Role.
Okay.
And like, but before that's about as much as far as it gets.
But before we go down the tangent of like effect of another game on a game that you're playing in, the reason I brought that up is because I have had that happen, where I was running a game and then one of the players brought up like, yeah, I'm playing with this other DM and he does all this stuff and like it's great, and it definitely gave me kind of like, I guess it would be like made me feel inferior because I was just starting out as a DM at that point. So at that point we were just using like, a kind of blank map, and we would draw on it to show like where everything is. But this other DM would like have miniatures and have all this other creative stuff that they would come up with.
Yeah, there's two ways for that to go. When you're a player and you're playing with a kind of green DM, and you're thinking of something that another DM would do, there's two ways to do that. There's the rude way of doing it, which is what you're describing, where
it wasn't even
makes
rude.
It gives you, well,
I've heard of
when
rude
I say rude, I just mean like
but
it makes you feel bad. And then the other way of doing it is it being like constructive and being like, hey, you did a great job, consider doing this. A lot of like this DM that I play with, who is more experienced and is a bit of a more like successful at what they do, like would do it this way, consider that. There's a I don't know. There's a different way
that's
of
absolutely
putting
it. And the person, there were some time, I won't say who it is because you know him, but it was way back in the day anyway. He wasn't meaning to be rude or anything. He just brought it up, and in the back of my head I had that thing of like, damn, like I thought that was a good game, and I hear about all this other like cool stuff that I either like can't or didn't think to do, and it makes you feel kind of lesser. And I think that's another like facet of it, coming from not so much on the new player side where you don't have as much exposure, on the DM side where you're running this game and you're trying to do, any good DM is trying to do the best that they can, and you hear that this DM would have done it better, or I've heard stories, Matt Mercer would do it this way, and that feeling is partly humbling, and it'll make you try to do better, but it also makes you feel like bad. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't even get mad in that situation because the person telling me this wasn't trying to be, it was after the game was done and we were just talking about stuff and it just came up. So it wasn't like ragging on what we were doing. It was just like, yeah, I'm doing this other thing, and you can hear the excitement in the voice. And yeah, so I'm gonna push back on that. It's just a theater type of thing, because there are role play heavy games, but there's also the gaming aspect of like Mercer's a DM, and it has
the fact that he has a room in his house dedicated to painting minis.
It has the name Mercer effect, but it's an effect that's been going on, I think, since Dungeons and Dragons began, because there are definitely,
it just has a figurehead now.
Yeah,
it just
definitely
has
more senior folks,
somebody
players.
whose headshot you could take and you can put it on the dartboard and just throw those darts uselessly at it. It reminds me of, so in film school we had to study this concept called so we had to study this thing, and it comes from this book called The Anxiety of Influence by Harold Bloom, and it's a literary criticism thing. It's like basically like a literary theory of like the psychological struggle between basically an artist and his predecessors, and the struggle between an artist and the art that influences them, and the artists that influence them.
Standing on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly.
Effect.
And the feeling that like you have to do better, and you have to do more, and you have to take the lessons of your predecessors to heart and whatever. And it does create a certain amount of anxiety, and some people either end up rejecting entirely the idea that their own work is influenced by other people, and then there are those who are like, here are my influences, would you like to see them? Okay. And I think in a certain way, because D&D is it's a storytelling game, that does kind of end up coming into play, because we whether we want it to or not, the things that the media that we're influenced by, and that includes other D&D media, will influence how we play the game and how we run the game and how, all of that. And I think that's where the Mercer effect happens. The Mercer effect is just another name for the anxiety of influence. It's knowing that you are a new artist, you are a storyteller, and there are greater storytellers than you out there. But just because there are people who may subjectively be better than you at doing something doesn't mean that you should not do it. Because if you just choose to stop doing it because somebody else is better than you at doing it, you're never going to get better.
And if people had that mindset, no one would ever do anything. No one would go out for
Art
sports.
would have stopped thousands of years ago.
No one would make music because all the music would have been made.
Right, or that's what people thought. It would have never have evolved. Evolution happens in the arts through people taking what people before them did and saying, this is good, but what if we did this? Or even just going, this is good, I'm gonna keep doing that. You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
No, definitely not.
But also, you don't have to be as good as the wheel, Cubes are great.
Be as good as the wheel.
I don't know.
You can be a square, it's fine. They're almost as good.
Listen, bricks are literally the building blocks of society. Other shapes matter.
All
Not
right.
everything has to be a wheel.
I think we're getting away from the point here.
I mean, I think we're still very much in the point. The point is
or
that
this is the metaphor.
the existence of Matthew Mercer and the existence of Critical Role does not diminish the importance that
Yes.
you as a DM have to the people who are playing in your game. And the existence of Critical Role and the players therein does not diminish what you can do in the game that you are playing at your local game store.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, the importance of what you put on your game is like completely up to you. So, yeah, if and you know, I think both you and I have heard stories of campaigns wanting to be run like it's Critical Role, saying the things that they do, you know, having the same kind of
The same character archetypes.
yeah, and like why? I that gets to my like original feeling on the Mercer effect on like it's kind of silly in some ways when you're trying to just ape their aesthetic and do their stuff. Like you're not this well produced show. You're making this game and you're playing this game and you're gonna have a story, whatever happens at the table, that all of 6 people in the world are going to know. Maybe a little more if you record it.
I think that comes from I don't know. I think I should have put a disclaimer at the top of this, and I guess I'll put it here, that like a lot of this is my own personal conjecture and personal feelings about
There's lots of aspects.
the situation, this concept, just based on my own experiences in fandom, in this fandom specifically, in D&D, in studying literature, in studying film. Like it's an amalgamation of all of my thoughts and feelings on media and all of that. So I think as far as like wanting, like to your point of like some people wanting to essentially recreate Critical Role in their home games, and you're right, it is a bit silly, but I think where that comes from is the same thing that spurs people on to write fan fiction. It's the same thing that spurs people on to cosplay. It's the same thing that spurs people on to make fan art of things. It's that desire to spend more time in a world, which is why I'm so adamant about the idea of these actual play tabletop shows being theater. They're shows, they're produced.
Yeah.
Even though they are improv and there's dice and there's the mechanics of D&D applied to it, ultimately, you as a viewer, you are a spectator, you are a consumer of this story that is being played out for you in front of you. You're not participating directly in it. Your only participation is in taking it in. So then you end up wanting to, or a lot of people end up wanting to, spend more time in that world, explore more within it. And I think that's what leads people, that sort of impulse is part of what leads people to want to recreate Critical Role in their home games. Or just essentially play the same characters because they want to spend more time with that character. They don't get their fill in the 4 hours of every episode.
A week, right?
A week, yes. Although that is including the 20-minute break in the middle, but that's neither here nor there.
That's still a lot of time.
That is still so much time. There are, at this point, almost a full 1,000 hours between both campaigns, and I have listened to almost all of it.
Are you okay, Lisa? All right.
No, it's okay. It's spread out over the past 3 years now. Ooh. Yeah. Yeah, So it's been 3 years since I got into Critical Role. When I got into it, it was right before they ended the first campaign. And the first campaign alone had like 500 plus hours worth of content to listen to.
Dear God.
And then it got easier once I got into the second campaign because it would just be like 4 hours a week. And I could like split it up, listen to it in bits over the weekend, and then, be ready in time for the next week. It wouldn't be like constantly listening to it through.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to throw too many stones. Like, I'm caught up on One
neither
Piece.
here nor there. That's not really the point. The point is, I think it's that fandom thing.
Yes, I was going to say.
It's the thing that drives people to.
There's another point you wanted to bring up.
Go to conventions and buy charms and make fan art and all of this stuff. And
I was going to say, so there's definitely the angle of, like, a DM and how Mercer kind of influences that side, then the player side, a new player. More experienced players, I think it varies, but more experienced players know that the Critical Role isn't the default for D&D and tabletop. It's an outlier. It's a big old outlier. Mm-hmm. But then you and I have spoken about this before, and there's definitely the other angle of fandom on just being part of this, and very, very easily, it could a situation of it could have been me, where you could see yourself falling down the rabbit hole of this Critical Role madness.
Thank you for reminding me. That's what I was going to get into. Is we're both big fans of the YouTube channel Crit Crab, where he goes through and he reads D&D horror stories, essentially. And there was one a few weeks ago where he read a story about, was it a player that was talking about two other players in a game that were essentially aping two characters that are from the second campaign of Critical Role, and just to try to play out, like, whatever fantasy they have about those characters. Yeah. And projecting that on the other players, and just being not the greatest players. They really should have just gone off and written fan fiction, but instead they wanted to play the game, because there's that extra layer with Critical Role that, like, a TV show doesn't have, where, like, there's this mechanic, right? There's this game that we're showing you how to play.
They want to have but I think the part I think jumping onto that, they also want to have that camaraderie at the table too. Right.
Well, I don't know. That story in particular didn't give off the sense that they wanted to have that camaraderie.
In that case, just between the two of them.
Right. They wanted to feel like they were doing the same thing that the people that they idolize are doing. Yeah. They wanted to feel that secondhand camaraderie with the Critical Role cast, not necessarily the other people sitting at the table playing D&D with them.
Which is a problem.
Which is part of the Critical Role effect, and it ends up coming back to that feeling of fandom. That particular story took me back to when I was in high school, and I was deep into fandom BS. Back in my day, the flavor of the time was something known as Super Wholock, which is a combination of Supernatural, Doctor Who, and Sherlock, because those were the three biggest fandoms, and the Venn diagram of people who were fans of those things was a circle.
No,
so we just chose to Brangelina it. I was a Super Wholock. I was also a Homestuck.
Oh no! I didn't know this, Lisa.
I don't know how, because this is literally how I met. But that's another story.
We've never spoken about Doctor Who.
Oh, bud. I'll get into it. It's fine. That's for another podcast entirely.
You don't want to go off on a tangent. That's for the podcast
where we just do, like, therapy sessions with me.
Oh my god, I'm learning so much.
What would it have been? 2011, 2012, 2013. If Critical Role had been out back then, I would have been those girls. I would have been that person who would have been like, I'm going to make a character that is essentially a recolor, an entire ripoff of a character from Critical Role, and I would have tried to join a D&D game and play that person and just copy the same voice and just, I would have done that. I was there. I understand that on a deep level. I get it. I understand. But what ends up happening is, what hopefully ends up happening is you end up gaining an understanding, a certain amount of media literacy and an understanding of how to interact with media in a different way. And you understand, oh, okay, no, that's, well, at least for D&D, it's like, that's kind of missing the point of D&D.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, like any
you
fandom,
start being exposed to other things, you interact with people, and you learn that, like, I may have misunderstood the assignment. I may have to go back to the drawing board for a minute.
I think with any fandom, there's a line where you cross from going of being a fan of this thing and enjoying it to
it was a hyperfixation.
Sure.
Now I know the word for it, but that's what it is. It's a hyperfixation, and it ends up taking over your life, and it's all you can think about, and it becomes a part of your personality. It becomes a part of your identity, is this piece of media. And so you end up wanting to live in it more. You want to experience it more. So you end up projecting it on the people around you and projecting it on the life around you. You
being
take
a fan
it
of
in as an intrinsic part of your identity.
Yes, that's
this
what
is
I'm getting
who
at.
I am. I am a super hulak.
Oh,
like,
God.
that was a thing. I am a Homestuck. That was a thing. It's like, it becomes a part of your identity.
The Homestuck thing I knew about, and I never touched, so I'm just gonna, like, let you have that one.
Like, it's crazy how so much, you could draw so many parallels to this. You know, the old Twilight fandom that is kind of making a comeback, but...
Did she just write another book?
She did just... Well, I don't know if she just wrote another book, but she did just
Release
publish another book.
Okay. Ew.
Listen, don't talk smack about Twilight in the year 2020. You're going to get flamed. Just
let him flame.
Just let it happen. Just let it be. But yeah, I don't know if I've made a single coherent thought this whole time.
No. So you were part of this fandom. You
right.
were there, not for D&D specifically, but in that situation.
Right, but I was in the same headspace that a lot of people are in when people talk about the Critical Role effect, because a lot of times, at least a lot of the stories that you read of these like D&D horror stories where they're having a player who is like deeply affected by the Critical Role effect is they're teenagers. Mm-hmm. They're like high schoolers
still
that
finding their way.
Yeah, but like I don't know. I can't find it in my heart to completely cringe at it, because like I was there. I get it. It's just a matter of like, all right, if you are a DM or you are a player who you're at a table and you realize that somebody at your table is projecting all of these expectations and this anxiety on this game, it's a conversation that has to happen. And it's just a matter of like pointing out like those are professionals. What they do is at a caliber that it takes a long time, and time is really the key thing to get to the point that they're at.
It's also one of their jobs.
It is. Well,
for that same person, do you get paid for playing this game with me?
Exactly. Or do you get paid to spend so much of your time thinking about this? No. You spend the rest of your week thinking about other things. You have other things to do. You should have other things to do.
Yeah.
Like, it is a game. It should be fun. And you should temper your expectations.
Going back to, I think, our very first episode, set the proper expectations.
Yeah. And just have a conversation about understanding that, like, you're regular people, and games are not going to be always going to be as high octane as you think they're going to be, or and your world might not be as detailed as you expect it to be, because your expectations are built off of someone who spends a lot of their time doing this, and someone who doesn't want you to feel that way. Somebody who wants you, because Mercer himself, he does not want people to feel this way. He does not want you as a new player to compare your DM and the players at your table to him as a DM and to the players at his table. He himself does not want that.
Yeah, he's gone on the record multiple times about that.
Oh yeah, he talks about it kind of a lot.
Because he doesn't want to be like a toxic influence on the D&D community.
Right, because a lot of people are getting turned off and turned away from the community entirely because they're trying to get into the game, but they're not necessarily into Critical Role, and then they're encountering people who are and who are trying to force them into this box. And I think
or vice versa, where
the idea of trying to force, it's almost backwards how, you know, people are going to this game trying to fit this thing into a box when it's such a creative game and it's about thinking out of the box.
And the opposite end of folks coming in thinking it's Critical Role, being disappointed, and then going away and thinking D&D's dumb. Because like, oh, it wasn't a professionally produced show with like a huge budget and professional actors behind it.
And like lighting and sets and you know, my
Sponsor
DM doesn't
deals.
do a voice for every single NPC.
Oh, I was gonna bring that up. Oh my god. So I hadn't.
Again, that's why it's theater. It's not realistic unless your DM is a veteran voice actor. Don't you dare put that expectation on your DM. Let your DM make that decision if they want to put that expectation on themselves.
Yeah,
that's another thing. But you as a player, don't put that expectation on your DM.
I am glad you brought that up because like I mentioned, I haven't listened to any Critical Role. I listened to the beginning of their second campaign, then stopped. And then a few weeks ago, started listening again just to catch up and see, you know, where they're at and do some research for this episode that we're doing. And in that episode, they're just doing a bunch of shopping, and Matt is just giving every single NPC a different voice. I'm just like, oh my god, I would hate to do this. I would hate to run Critical Role. Like, I have to do a voice for every single one of these rando people. And like they all have a different personality and they all have a different thing. And I know he's making most of this up off the top of his head and just making a note in case they ever come back. But oh my god, just like from my perspective, I hate to run Critical Role because then there's just like there's so much more lifting you have to do as well as like a dungeon master, even on the player side. They bring so much to the table. Oh god, the anxiety on my end of like having to do that, of having someone ask me to do that. She's like, no, why are you asking me to do this? We have 4 hours and then I have to like go to bed for work in the morning or something. No.
Yeah. Like, this is why whenever we're about to get into my game, I make it very clear. All of the planning for this session happened within the last 2 hours. Because I have work. I have other things to worry about. I have other games to be in.
Yeah.
I have a whole life. I don't get paid to DM. I do it for fun because I like my friends. I want to spend time with my friends, and this is how we have chosen to spend time together. So I'm going to do some amount of work, but I am not Mercer. And then I think there is the player expectation of the DM, and then there are the DMs who watch Critical Role and have that expectation of themselves. To those DMs, those of you out there who are in this little paddle boat with me, please be kind to yourselves. Think of him. Think of Matthew Mercer. Think of how he would feel to know that you feel discouraged or, you know, sad in any way about your own performance as a DM. That would not make him happy. If that's how you have to think about it. But yeah, you don't have to compare yourself to him. You don't have to do everything that he does. And don't expect what his players do to be what your players do.
Mm-hmm.
Don't expect the kind of interaction that his players have with his world. Don't expect your players to have that kind of interaction with your world.
Yeah.
I think you can put as much time and thought and effort in as you want.
Yeah,
but ultimately,
I think,
you should think about like who you're playing with, and you should set expectations for yourself.
Yeah, I think the better way to kind of look at it is your players are going to interact the way that they're going to interact, the way that is unique to them, that's unique to your table. So you'll have your own, vibe, your own setup that's going to be completely unique from Mercer that they would never be able to reproduce on their side. Or
that's
any
the
other
beauty
table
of
could.
D&D is the dynamic nature of it. It's every single game is different.
Mm-hmm. Every game is unique. Every table's unique.
And the other thing is just that, like, so with them being professional actors, something that actors are very, very good at, it's taking a character and taking apart all of their motivations, the things that drive them, and making unique people out of thoughts. And so
the reason I'm laughing, sorry, I'll tell you in a second. I was going to say, the reason I'm laughing is, I think we've talked about this before, where I make jokes about the fact that you have like a million characters and they're all warlocks, but you're like, I only have 4 characters. And that's true, right? You only have about like 4 actual characters you have made and would use in the game, because you have kind of their builds made up, but you also have like what their backstory is and where they're coming from. You kind of flesh them out, right?
Right. But ultimately, when I play any of them, they kind of all end up having the same personality. Because I am not a professional actor who can, like, take apart people's motivations and whatever. I just end up just playing myself with different attacks.
That aside, you have, like, a backstory and you have a thing for all of your characters. How you, quote-unquote, act or play or whatever in the game can get, you flavor that however you are. But you've kind of fleshed them out. I, on the other hand, I have the D&D Beyond, like the Plus account, so that's how I DM all these games. And you know what I do in my spare time? I just create characters. I just create them like sketches. Like if I'm throwing darts at a board, I'm like, this race and this this race and this class, and put it together. I have like 16 characters. So if my character dies in your game, I have something to go. I think that comes from the DM side of, and I've mentioned this before. If one of my characters dies in the game, I'm gonna be like, damn, that sucks. All right, new character time.
Yeah. I'm actually starting to get that.
It's
my
happening.
Character almost died in the other game, the game I don't play with you.
Yeah.
I also play a warlock in that game, but we had a kraken fight that I went down, and I'm the closest thing that we have to a healer. Oof. Just because I have spared the dying. And that was when we realized, oh shit, we don't have potions.
Someone's gonna have to make like medicine checks.
Yeah. So somebody was able to revive me, but so basically what happened is, like, it was right at the end of the session. I went down, and then we had to end the session. So we were like, oh god, we're gonna find out how this fight goes next week. And during the week, I was like, I've grown really attached to this character. I see the arc that my DM is setting up for me, and I appreciate it. But if I die, I don't mind. I have a character. I have a backup.
Yeah.
I got it. It's fine.
If I die, I die.
Yeah, the other players were all like, oh my god, if Azrael dies, we're going to feel so bad. And I'm like, y'all are going to feel bad, but
y'all are going to feel way worse than I am.
I've got backups. I'm good.
I think I've told you about this, right? I already have an idea of the character I'll play if, Redson, my character in your game, dies. Like, I already have a thing ready for him. As like, if he dies, like, oh damn, I died. Oh well.
Man, that sucks. He had he had a lot of potential, but next.
Yep, next. And like in the world of
so freeing. It's so freeing. I think there's definitely a balance to be achieved. Oh, this is such a tangent, but there's definitely a balance to be achieved between like not caring at all and caring enough to give your character a backstory, a personality, and all of this, and you know, make them.
I don't think
give
it's
them
too
a skeleton
much of a
and some amount of flesh, but you know, also just realizing that it is a game and you can make another character and you can make something that is also interesting. There is so much that you can do.
Yeah.
And again, this game it's so dynamic.
I don't think it's too much of a tangent, because you were just talking about how all the folks in Critical Role like break down their character, and that makes like character deaths like really matter. But in normal D&D, especially when you're a dungeon master and you're exposed to it so much from the other side of the veil, like it changes your mindset, because the players themselves may have this this thing where maybe they're not like actors and they're getting into the voices and doing all the stuff, but like they may have a backstory behind it. But as the dungeon master, and I'm assuming Mercer feels the same way when he plays stuff, like, if my character dies, he dies. I'm in this so much, like this game that we are playing. I'm not acting, and this isn't Hamlet, and Claudius isn't being stabbed here. The effort that they put into doing all of that, they're getting paid to do all of that. Like, always remember that. Anyone coming into this, like, they're getting paid to like do their craft and do all this. If you're not, it's totally okay.
Yeah,
it is
I think
fine.
that definitely the fact that this is one of their jobs definitely does get lost in the sauce, because there is such a organic dynamic
and
between
they're actual
them,
friends.
because they are actual friends. And for a long time before they were playing Critical Role, doing Critical Role every week, they were playing this game every couple of months. This is the other thing, is the expectation to play every single week. Oh boy, this isn't my job. I don't do this as a show. We're gonna play every 2 weeks, and that's pushing it.
Yeah, as we've seen in
before
recent history.
Before they started streaming on Geek and Sundry their game every week, they were playing every couple of weeks, once a month, and they would have like brunch, and the session would last a couple of hours. Like, it wasn't every week. It wasn't even every 2 weeks. It was like once a month that they were playing, and sometimes they would go months between playing. That's something that has also been skewed, is the expectation of playing every single week.
Yeah.
If that fits in everybody's schedule and the DM can handle that, good for them. That's amazing. Cool. But most normal people with day jobs can't do that.
Going to school, day jobs,
going to day job, having a family,
stuff.
Absolutely. Having other responsibilities.
Yeah.
This is a game. This is a hobby.
Yeah.
This is a hobby.
If you're getting paid Mercer money, then yes, play every single week. If you're not, don't try to like keep up with their schedule, because that's an easy way to burn out the DM, the players, or everyone involved.
Exactly.
But yeah. So
I don't know if I've entirely exhausted all of my thoughts on this, but I think that's...
I was going to ask beforehand, did you have a list? Did you have a list of things you wanted to hit?
No, I didn't really have a list. My list is just... It has 3 bullet points. It just says theater, expectations, anxiety of influence, and I've really hit all of that. I guess the 4th bullet point is the time expectation. But I think that's really like the main things.
Yeah.
Is, I guess the takeaway is, if you are a player or a DM and you are either, feeling that anxiety of, or you're either feeling that anxiety of like comparing yourself to the players on Critical Role, or you're feeling the anxiety of somebody at your table comparing your home D&D game to something like Critical Role, have that conversation about expectations, about, the difference in caliber, in the fact that like you're regular people. This is a hobby. This is not anybody's job. This is something that you want to do for fun, and that the expectations are different.
Yeah. It definitely dovetails back to
it really it just boils down to expectations, which is something that I think we talk about every single episode.
Every single episode, set proper expectations, and that's absolutely it.
And I'm glad we got this out of the way, because then we never have to talk about it again.
Until you come back to me like tomorrow and you're like, there's all these other things that I forgot to mention.
Oh, for sure, but
Mercer
podcasts last forever, so we'll get to it again. We'll have a part 2.
I think
I'll
we could have a part 2.
to say eventually.
Maybe not with just you and I, but other DMs as well, and maybe their experiences with this. We keep mentioning that we're gonna have guests on, and we haven't.
And then
yet.
we still haven't had any.
So I think
we'll blame COVID for that.
Yeah, sure. I think that's what we'll probably do next. So we've tackled like some of the bedrock stuff of D&D, and next let's talk about like stories, and some of these stories that only 6 people in the world have ever heard. Let's post those on the internet. How about that?
Yeah.
All right.
I can't wait to get into people's experiences other than ours.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like my experience is pretty limited. It's very recent. I don't know why I have the audacity to be out here trying to tell people how to play D&D. I've only been doing it for 3 years. Like, I can't wait to get more people in here to not only to like, have something recorded for posterity, but also to learn myself from other DMs, other players.
Yeah. I don't have too much more experience than you, and like I said, 5 years. And and sections of that was taking a break and not running anything for a while. So no, it's totally fine. Like I said, and I take your point, because a lot of your experience is going to be like mirrored with me, because I'm in most of these games that you're talking about.
I can't tell you anything that you don't already know.
So, like,
and if I go too much into my game,
influence,
then that's spoilers for you.
Yeah. So we'll look to get that kind of outside opinion and outside influence as well. But yeah.
Yeah, it's very circular.
You want to do the outro?
That's the word.
Insular.
Okay. I guess with all of that said, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Oops, All Dragons. Oops, All Dragons is a group effort. Our show is edited by Noel Hernandez, our theme was composed by Brendan Lyons, and our logo art is by Azif On Q. Links to more of their work and their social media will be in the show notes.